Te koto te whānau o Auckland Unitarians. Te koto nā mana here. No mai, hara mai. Hara mai ki tere whāra karakia a te atua. Te koto tēnā tātou katoa. We welcome you into this circle of community. Welcome into this space made sacred by Auckland Unitarians for 118 years. We welcome you from demands and delights of the daily round, from the dirty dishes and unwaxed floors, from the unmowed grass and untrimmed bushes, and from all incompleteness and not yet startedness, from the unholy and the unresolved. We invite you to attend to our vision of peace and justice, to cleanliness and health, of delight and devotion, of the lovely and the holy, of who we are and what we can do. We welcome the power of tradition and the exhilaration of newness, the wisdom of the ages and the knowing of the very young. We welcome beauty, eloquence, poetry, and music to be the bearers of our dreams. We welcome you to open your eyes, your ears, your minds, your hearts to the amplest dimensions of life. We especially welcome you if you're a visitor, just passing through or seeking a spiritual home. Know that we're pleased and honored by your presence. You should also know that our worship service is the prelude to morning tea. It is our sacrament of hospitality. Please join us. It won't be complete without you. Pity poor Tevye, not because he's the father of 5 daughters, but because he is bound to his traditions. Here in Anatevka, we have traditions for everything, he tells us. Without traditions, our lives would be as shaky as a fiddler on the roof. And if you know the story, you know that it is a tale of a man, a little town, a culture that is trying desperately to hold on to its traditions, while all around them the world is changing. Each step along the way, Tevye is challenged to examine his traditions and called to make a choice, to hold on to them or to let them go. And let them go he does, albeit always reluctantly. He allows one of his daughters to marry for love rather than by arranged marriage. He offers a blessing to another daughter who wants to leave the village to be with her husband. And finally, in the ultimate letting go of tradition, he packs up all of his belongings, leaves Anatevka, and moves to America. Fiddler on the Roof shows us how painful it can be to lose our traditions, and sometimes it's our only choice. Within each of us, there is a light, the same light as the source, the same radiance that is in all creatures. May this small flame I light be a constant reminder to us of our true nature and our kinship with all creation. Each week we sing Roots, Hold Me Close, Wings Set Me Free. It's the spirit of life residing within each of us. The image resonates with a truth so deeply entrenched in us. It could be part of our DNA. The metaphor is universal. I wonder if it might go back to our earliest ancestors, one that we all share. Carl Jung might consider it an archetype, a concept that resides in our collective unconscious the world over. The idea that our lives are grounded and nourished by our roots doesn't have to be explained. We know its truth. Our intuition and an experience say so. Without roots, we're lost. We don't know who we are or what our purpose might be. But roots without wings can trap us in our past and the expectations of others. Our roots can prevent us from seeing the world more fully from the perspective and experience of others. They can hold us so fast that we are blinded to our potential and paralyzed to act. Roots can keep our hopes and dreams at the airport waiting for the fog to lift, as many have been recently in winter. What happened that shouldn't have because someone couldn't get to her destination? What didn't happen either way for the lack of wings? The world did not become all it could be this week. For me, my taproot is the Episcopal Church. I grew up in it. I didn't choose it. My parents did. For the time I was 5, my family went to church every Sunday. We all participated in our parish life in ways appropriate to our age and gifts. We moved a lot when I was a kid. In that respect, I was rootless. But the first thing we did upon arrival in the new town was to connect with the local church. While we moved, our community of faith was already there, waiting to welcome us. Its traditions, liturgy, expectations, offerings were familiar and consistent over time and space. We knew what to expect and where we fitted in. It grounded me. It gave me the security to enter the foreign, sometimes frightening territory of a new community to which we had moved. As a kid, it was not an easy thing to be in the new kid school 7 different times in 12 years. My taproot made it easier. Many churches celebrated different seasons throughout the year. Christmas is 12 days. Easter is 50 days. Advent is the 4 weeks before Christmas. And the season this child spent wondering what he was going to get, the 4 weeks before Christmas, that's the season this child spent wondering what he was going to get under the tree. Then there is my favorite one, Lent. Lent, even though it is the season where the question is, what are you going to give up? Not every Christian denomination celebrates Lent, but it is 40 days before Easter. It is a reminder of when Jesus spent 40 days in the desert after his baptism, reflecting on who he was and what that meant for his purpose in life. Lent begins with Ash Wednesday, the day after Shrove Tuesday. Even if you don't have a Christian background, you've probably heard of Mardi Gras, which literally means Fat Tuesday. Sometimes it's also known as Pancake Tuesday. It was a time to use up the fat in the house in preparation to fast during Lent. As a teenager, I remember it as a time to when the youth group made and served pancakes to the congregation. That was just the beginning of good eating during Lent. I know I said it was a time of fasting, but in churches I attended, one day a week, the congregation would gather for religious education. There was something for all ages. It would be preceded by a potluck. I loved them, still do, partly because they were a break in routine, making the ordinary event of having dinner special. But more importantly, it was the diversity of plates people brought that attracted me. It gave me a glimpse into their private lives, or at least what they ate. I remember those suppers as a time of connection. I didn't have the words yet, but they were powerful occasions of the beloved community in action. When I was a child, Lent also meant giving up something like chocolate or some other favorite treat. We were to take the pennies we saved and not buying it and put them in a small box called a mite box. A mite is a small coin. On Easter Day, we would bring the box and put it in the offering. The money was to help children in need around the world. I thought that was cool, but even better, Easter meant I could now eat the chocolate bunny in my Easter basket. When I became an adult, Lent became a much deeper experience. The theater of worship was a time of wonder and mystery, beginning with Ash Wednesday. As a priest, after the pancake supper, I would go home and take the dried palms from the previous year's Palm Sunday procession and burn them to make a fine powder of ash by pushing them through a sieve. The next day, I would use them to make a cross on the forehead of each member of the congregation, reminding them, "Thou art dust, and to dust thou shalt return." I found it to be a profoundly mystical experience. For the truth of those words reminds us we are all formed of the same stardust. We are one. I came to understand the season of Lent as a designated time out from the routines in our life. It was a time to stop and reflect. Yes, it was a time of fasting, prayer, and almsgiving, but they were just tools to reboot my life. It was a time for stock taking and seeking connection to all that is sacred within and beyond me. It is a time to find healing and wholeness. Another word for that is simply salvation. Not a word we use in a Unitarian setting. When I became your minister, I thought I was giving up Lent for Lent. Certainly in the 3 congregations I have served, there has been no mention of it or tradition of practicing its disciplines. After doing some research, I discovered I was wrong. Unitarians have long practiced the spiritual disciplines in Lent and still do. That is not too surprising if we remember that for most of our 500-year history, we were the liberal edge of Christianity. Those are our roots. But the Unitarian history of celebrating Lent tells us how we morphed into a faith beyond Christianity. Let me make clear that moving beyond Christianity does not mean tossing it on the ash heap of history. I mean it in the same way Jesus did when he says in the Gospel of Matthew, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill." Jesus gave wings to Hebrew wisdom, taking it to a new level. Over time, Unitarians did that with Christianity, becoming something new in religious history, something more Christian than the Christianity in my mind. It is our wings that allow us to describe ourselves as a living tradition. 2 people played a large part in attaching wings to our tradition. The Unitarian minister, William Ellery Channing, and the Universalist minister, Hosea Ballou. In 1819, Channing gave an address entitled Unitarian Christianity. Most of us today would not agree with a lot of his understanding of Christianity. For instance, Unitarian Christians at the time very much believed that Jesus was the Son of God, not in a divine sense, but as an adopted human son. However, Channing did emphasize something we still hold to today, that the idea that our deeds and not creeds are what define us. A few years later, he gave a blockbuster sermon entitled Likeness to God. It contained ideas that would shape our understanding of Lent. He explored the idea of unfolding of our own being to discover our innate divinity, to grow in our right living. To do so was to discover our likeness to God. Hosea Ballou, a contemporary of Channing's, challenged the orthodox view of what God's likeness was. In his breakout sermon with the exciting title, A Treatise on Atonement, He rejected the idea that the death of Jesus was to appease an angry God. He argued that God did not turn away from us, but vice versa. In his words, God is a being of eternal love who seeks the happiness of his human children. Ballou was convinced that once people understood this, they would take pleasure in living a moral life and doing good works. Ballou sowed the seeds for us today to embrace an ethic of responsibility based upon our interconnections and our celebration of a courageous love that calls us to heal pain and counter oppression in our world. His prevailing idea, whatever this is, we are in it together. Together, Channing and Ballou have described my understanding of Lent's purpose: to take time out to reflect on the true nature of our being and to discover our place in the interdependent web of all existence, that we might live out our common purpose to love and heal a world in pain. They did this by moving beyond Christianity and its view of God and humanity. Instead of Lent being a time of repentance for being the miserable sinners orthodoxy claimed us to be, that we might seek salvation through the cruel death of God's Son, they put wings on Lent, making it about new life, a new life of interconnection with the divine love within, between and beyond us, and a very different kind of salvation indeed. It's one where we do the saving. Unitarians and Universalists took these ideas and for many years produced Lent manuals separately and later published them together. They were collections of 40 meditations, one for each day of Lent. One for the last 50 years since the merger of Unitarians and Universalists, published collections of meditations have not followed the Lenten format, with the idea that Lent does not have to be rooted in the 40 days before Easter. The practices of Lent can be done at any time we choose. The spiritual benefits are unchanged. The challenge is to actually make that time for reflection, fasting, and almsgiving. It could be a little like telling someone, let's do lunch sometime. We know how often that lunch happens. As a priest, on Ash Wednesday, I would invite those gathered to have a Holy Lent. Today, I invite you to have a Holy Lent sometime, and may it give you wings. Amen. For our meditation time, I offer you these words by Gustav Mahler. Tradition is not the worship of ashes, but the preservation of fire.
for my closing words. They're from the Catholic mystic and monk Thomas Merton, and invites us to draw a distinction between tradition and convention. Tradition is living and active, but convention is passive and dead. Tradition does not form us automatically. We have to work to understand it. Convention is accepted passively as a matter of routine. Tradition, which is always old, is at the same time ever new because it is always reviving, born again in each new generation, to be lived and applied in a new and particular way. Tradition nourishes the life of the Spirit.